The woman in the front row. The invitation that changed everything. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud, it's simply showing up. The white envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Nadia Morgan almost ignored it. She had spent the entire morning trying to distract herself with work, hoping another busy day would keep her from thinking about her husband, Daniel. Over the past few months, he had become distant. The late-night meetings, unexpected business trips, and unanswered phone calls had become normal. She wanted to believe him. After all, they had been married for 6 years. 6 years of birthdays. 6 years of promises. 6 years of building a life together. She trusted him. Or at least, she thought she did. The envelope had no return address. Only her name. Mrs. Nadia Morgan. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully opened it. Inside was a beautifully designed wedding invitation. Elegant gold lettering shimmered across the thick ivory paper. She smiled for a second, assuming one of Daniel's business partners had invited them to a wedding. Then she read the groom's name. Daniel Morgan. Her smile disappeared. She blinked. Read it again. And again. Maybe there was another Daniel Morgan. There had to be. Then her eyes moved to the bride's name. Sophia Carter. Not her. Not even close. Her fingers began to tremble. At the bottom of the invitation, a handwritten note had been added. We thought you deserved to know the truth. No signature. Nothing else. Only those 7 words. The room suddenly felt colder. For nearly 10 minutes, Nadia sat frozen at the kitchen table. She wasn't crying. Not yet. Her mind refused to accept what her eyes had just seen. She reached for her phone and called Daniel. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. One more time. Nothing. She texted him. Where are you? No reply. 30 minutes passed. Still nothing. Then she opened their shared family calendar. Daniel had marked the entire weekend as Executive Conference, Boston. Except, the wedding invitation clearly showed the ceremony would take place in Chicago. Same date. Same time. Different city. Different life. Her stomach twisted. Someone was lying. That evening Daniel finally came home. He looked tired. Or perhaps, he was pretending to. He kissed her forehead. Long day. Nadia forced a smile. Very. He loosened his tie and walked into the kitchen. Mine too. She watched every movement, every expression, every breath. How could someone lie so naturally? She wanted to place the invitation on the table. She wanted to scream. She wanted answers. Instead, she simply asked, So how's Boston? Daniel stopped for half a second. Barely noticeable. Then he smiled. I leave Friday morning. Lie. Another lie. She looked directly into his eyes. I'm sure it'll be a successful trip. He nodded. I hope so. That night Nadia couldn't sleep. Daniel rested peacefully beside her. Or at least, he pretended to. She quietly reached for his phone while he slept. Locked. Face ID. No chance. She placed it back. As she turned away, his smartwatch lit up on the bedside table. A notification appeared. Sophia Redhart. Everything is ready. I can't wait to become Mrs. Morgan. Nadia stopped breathing. The screen went dark. She closed her eyes. One silent tear rolled down her cheek. Not because she had lost him. Because she realized she had never truly known him. The next morning, she made a decision. No arguments. No confrontation. No dramatic accusations. If Daniel wanted to lie, she would let him continue. She wanted the whole truth. Every piece of it. Over the next 3 days, Nadia quietly investigated. She searched public records, social media, business reports, old interviews. At first, nothing unusual. Daniel's company, Morgan Technologies, appeared successful, growing rapidly, winning major contracts, featured in business magazines. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Then she found something strange. 3 years earlier, Morgan Technologies had nearly gone bankrupt. Yet somehow, within 6 months, the company suddenly received an anonymous investment worth nearly $300 million. The investor's identity remained confidential. No one knew who had saved the company, except the documents listed only one phrase. Primary silent partner. Name confidential. Nadia frowned. Daniel had always claimed he built the company alone. So who had actually saved it? Later that afternoon, Nadia visited the company headquarters without telling Daniel. Employees greeted her politely. Most of them recognized the owner's wife. As she walked through the executive floor, she noticed something unusual. People looked nervous. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered. Then she overheard two senior managers. "I heard the wedding is this Saturday. Do you think she'll ever find out?" "Daniel." They weren't talking about another man. They were talking about him. One manager noticed Nadia standing nearby. His face instantly turned pale. "And Nadia?" The other manager turned around. Complete silence. Neither of them said another word. Nadia smiled politely. "It's all right." She walked away before either of them could explain. Now she knew. The company knew. People had been keeping the secret from her. For how long? Weeks. Months. Years. That evening she hired a private investigator. His name was Michael Hayes, one of Chicago's best. "I don't need assumptions," Nadia told him. "I need facts." Michael nodded. "Facts are usually worse." She handed him Daniel's photograph. "I want everything. Bank accounts, travel history, business partners, hidden properties, anything." Michael looked at the photo, then looked back at Nadia. "You may not like what I find." Nadia's voice was calm. "I stopped expecting good news the moment I opened that invitation." 2 days later, Michael called. His voice sounded unusually serious. "We need to meet. Not over the phone. Not by email. In person." He placed a thick file on the cafe table. "I've investigated wealthy people for over 20 years. He paused. "I've never seen anything quite like this." Nadia slowly opened the file. Photographs, financial statements, property deeds, luxury hotel reservations, secret meetings, private flights. Then, a photograph of Daniel, holding Sophia's hand, both smiling, both wearing engagement rings. The date stamp. 8 months earlier, Daniel had proposed to another woman. While still married to Nadia, her hands began shaking. Michael wasn't finished. "There's something even bigger." He slid another folder across the table. "This isn't just an affair. It's connected to Morgan Technologies." Nadia looked confused. "What do you mean?" Michael lowered his voice. "I think your husband isn't just hiding another woman." He took a deep breath. "I think he's hiding another identity." Nadia stared at him in silence. "What identity?" Michael looked around the cafe before answering. "I can't prove it yet, but someone inside the company has been moving billions of dollars through shell corporations. The signatures don't match Daniel's legal records, but every trail somehow leads back to him." Nadia felt the ground disappear beneath her. "What are you saying?" Michael answered slowly. "I think your husband's wedding is only the beginning." Friday morning arrived. Daniel kissed Nadia goodbye. "I'll see you Monday." She smiled gently. "Have a safe trip." He walked out the front door, believing his biggest secret was still safe. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, Nadia walked upstairs. She opened her closet, removed the elegant navy blue dress she had bought years ago. The one Daniel once called the most beautiful dress I've ever seen. She looked at herself in the mirror. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with determination. She whispered softly, "If today changes my life, then I'll face it with my head held high." She picked up the wedding invitation one last time. The ceremony would begin in just a few hours, and Daniel had no idea that the woman he had betrayed would be sitting in the very first row. The woman no one expected. The Grand Regency Hotel had hosted celebrities, politicians, and billionaire families. Tonight, every crystal chandelier glowed with golden light, every white rose had been arranged with perfection, and every guest believed they were about to witness the wedding of two successful young entrepreneurs. No one imagined they were about to witness the collapse of a carefully constructed lie. A black luxury sedan stopped quietly outside the venue. Nadia stepped out. She wore the navy blue dress Daniel had once said was his favorite. Simple, elegant, confident. There were no expensive diamonds around her neck. No dramatic makeup. No expression of anger. Only quiet dignity. She walked toward the entrance with calm, steady steps. A wedding coordinator smiled politely. "Welcome. May I see your invitation?" Nadia handed over the cream-colored card. The coordinator checked the guest list. "Of course, Mrs. Morgan." For a brief moment, Nadia noticed confusion flash across the woman's face. Mrs. Morgan? But the bride wasn't Mrs. Morgan. Not yet. The coordinator forced another smile. Please, enjoy the ceremony. Inside, soft piano music floated through the ballroom. Hundreds of candles reflected against polished marble floors. Business executives mingled with politicians. Fashion influencers posed for photographs. Members of Daniel's company laughed together as if nothing unusual were happening. Nadia slowly looked around. She recognized several faces. Executives from Morgan Technologies, board members, investors, even Daniel's college friends. Some of them had attended her own wedding 6 years earlier. Now they were attending his second one. A few guests noticed her. At first, they smiled politely. Then recognition struck. Their smiles vanished. One woman nearly dropped her champagne glass. Two executives whispered to each other. A man immediately looked away. Within seconds, quiet murmurs spread through the ballroom. Isn't that? It can't be! What is she doing here? Nadia ignored every stare. She walked straight down the center aisle, past rows of white chairs, past the flower arrangements, past the photographers, until she reached the very first row. She sat down, crossed her hands gently in her lap, and waited. Backstage, Daniel adjusted his tuxedo in front of a mirror. His best man, Eric, laughed. You finally made it. Daniel smiled nervously. I've waited a long time for this. Eric noticed his friend's uneasy expression. You okay? Daniel forced a laugh. Just wedding nerves. A wedding assistant entered the room. 5 minutes. Everyone stood. Daniel straightened his jacket. As he stepped toward the ballroom entrance, he glanced toward the front row. His entire body froze. There she was, Nadia, looking directly at him. Calm, silent, completely composed. Daniel's face turned white. His breathing stopped. No, he whispered. This isn't possible. Eric followed Daniel's gaze. Oh my God! What is she doing here? Daniel couldn't answer. His hands began trembling. He took one step backward, then another. I told you to make sure she never found out. Eric looked horrified. I thought she was in New York. So did I. Daniel's voice cracked. So did I. Across the ballroom, Sophia waited behind the bridal doors. She wore an elegant designer gown worth nearly $50,000. She admired herself in the mirror. Everything had gone according to plan. Daniel had promised her that his past was finished. His divorce was just paperwork. She believed him. She knew nothing about Nadia. Nothing. The music changed. The ceremony began. Guests stood. Daniel walked toward the altar. Every step felt heavier than the last. He couldn't stop looking at Nadia. She never looked away. She simply watched him. Without shouting. Without crying. Without hatred. That silence terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. Sophia entered the ballroom. The guests applauded. She smiled brightly. Her father proudly walked beside her. Halfway down the aisle, she noticed something strange. Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was staring at someone else. Confused, Sophia followed his line of sight. She saw Nadia, the elegant woman seated in the front row. Sophia frowned. Who's she? Her father quietly whispered. I don't know. The officiant welcomed everyone. Dear friends and family, we are gathered here today. His voice echoed through the ballroom. Daniel barely heard a word. Sweat rolled down his forehead. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Every few seconds, he looked at Nadia. She remained perfectly still, almost peaceful. That frightened him even more. The officiant smiled. If anyone present knows of any lawful reason these two should not be joined in marriage. He paused. Speak now, or forever hold your peace. The room fell silent. Daniel closed his eyes. Please, don't stand up. Please, not here. Not now. 5 seconds passed. 10. No one spoke. Daniel exhaled in relief. Maybe she wasn't going to expose him after all. Maybe he still had a chance. Then, a voice echoed from the ballroom entrance. Excuse me. Every head turned. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit walked inside, carrying a black leather briefcase. Beside him were 2 uniformed officers. Behind them stood an elderly gentleman with silver hair and an expensive walking cane. The atmosphere instantly changed. The officiant frowned. I'm sorry, sir. This is a private ceremony. The stranger calmly smiled. It was... He held up an official document. But not anymore. Daniel's eyes widened. He recognized the man immediately. Richard, he whispered. The elderly gentleman slowly stepped forward. Every board member in the audience immediately stood up in respect. Some even looked nervous. Sophia quietly asked, "Who is that?" Her father answered in disbelief. "Richard Whitmore, the founder of Whitmore Global Holdings." Sophia's face lost its color. One of the richest businessmen in America, worth billions. Why would he attend her wedding? Richard looked around the ballroom before speaking. "I apologize for interrupting, but this ceremony involves a company under my legal protection." Confused whispers filled the room. Daniel tried to interrupt. "This has nothing to do with business." Richard calmly smiled. "Actually, it has everything to do with business." The man carrying the briefcase stepped forward. "My name is Jonathan Reed. I'm the legal representative of Whitmore Global Holdings." He placed several thick folders on a nearby table. "Before this marriage can legally continue, there are serious matters that must be addressed." Daniel's voice rose. "This is outrageous. You can't interrupt my wedding." Jonathan looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "I can, because your marriage license application contains information that appears to be false." The ballroom erupted into whispers. Sophia looked confused. "What does that mean?" Jonathan answered calmly. "It means Mr. Daniel Morgan has declared himself unmarried." Every guest turned toward Daniel. Sophia slowly stepped away from him. "What?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jonathan continued. "However," he turned toward the first row, "our records indicate that Mr. Daniel Morgan has been legally married for the past 6 years." He looked directly at Nadia. "And his lawful wife is seated here today." The ballroom fell completely silent. Sophia stared at Nadia, then back at Daniel, then back again. Her lips trembled. "You told me you were divorced." Daniel whispered, "I can explain." Sophia took another step backward. "No, you lied." Before Daniel could say another word, Richard Whitmore raised his hand. "We're still not finished." He looked toward Nadia with surprising warmth. "Miss Morgan, I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." Nadia slowly stood. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence. Richard smiled gently. "You have no idea how important you really are." Daniel's heart nearly stopped, because he knew exactly what Richard was about to reveal. And if the truth came out, he wouldn't just lose his wedding. He would lose everything. The silent partner. A silence so heavy settled over the ballroom that even the musicians lowered their instruments. No one moved. No one spoke. Every eye was fixed on Richard Whitmore. Daniel's heartbeat pounded against his ribs. "Please, not today," he thought. "Not here." Richard ignored him completely. Instead, he walked slowly toward Nadia. His expression wasn't one of pity. It was respect. He stopped a few feet away and extended his hand. "Mrs. Morgan, thank you for coming." Nadia hesitated for only a moment before shaking it. "I wasn't expecting an invitation from you." Richard smiled faintly. "Neither was I." A ripple of confused whispers spread through the crowd. The chairman of Whitmore Global Holdings, greeting the betrayed wife as if she were an honored guest. Nothing about this made sense. Daniel finally found his voice. "Richard, enough. This is between my wife and me." Richard turned toward him. "No, Daniel. It stopped being just your private matter the moment you built your business with money that was never truly yours." The room fell silent again. Daniel's face drained of color. Jonathan Reed unlocked the leather briefcase and removed a thick blue folder. This folder contains contracts, investment agreements, financial audits, and ownership records dating back 3 years. He placed the documents on the table. They have all been independently verified. A projector screen behind the altar slowly lit up. The wedding slideshow disappeared. In its place appeared the logo of Morgan Technologies. Guests stared in disbelief. This had become something entirely different from a wedding. Jonathan clicked a remote. A timeline appeared. 3 years earlier. Morgan Technologies, emergency financial status. Revenue collapsing. Banks refusing additional loans. Major investors withdrawing. Projected bankruptcy within 60 days. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. They remembered those desperate months. Daniel had told everyone he saved the company through brilliant negotiations. Jonathan spoke calmly. Mr. Morgan publicly claimed he rescued the company through private investment. He clicked again. But that statement was false. A new document appeared. Emergency capital injection. $300 million. Source. Primary silent partner. Identity confidential. Gasps echoed across the ballroom. People had heard rumors about the mysterious investor for years. No one had ever learned the truth. Daniel clenched his fists. This proves nothing. Jonathan nodded. You're right. It doesn't. He smiled slightly. The next document does. Another page appeared on the screen. It contained a handwritten signature. Below it was a fingerprint verification report. Then another signature. And another. Every document matched the same person. Jonathan turned toward Nadia. Mrs. Morgan, would you please come forward? Confused, Nadia slowly walked toward the stage. Jonathan handed her a fountain pen. Please sign your name. She looked at Richard. He nodded reassuringly. She signed. Nadia Morgan. Jonathan placed her signature beside the contracts, then displayed a digital comparison. 99.98% match. The ballroom exploded with shocked voices. Daniel closed his eyes. It was over. Sophia stared at the screen. No, she whispered. This isn't possible. Jonathan addressed the audience. The anonymous investor, the silent partner who legally owns 49% of Morgan Technologies. He paused. Is Mrs. Nadia Morgan? The room erupted. Executives looked at one another in disbelief. Board members stood from their seats. Several reporters, invited to cover the high-profile wedding, immediately began recording everything. Nadia herself looked stunned. What? She turned toward Richard. I've never invested $300 million. Richard smiled gently. I know. You didn't even know it happened. Nadia frowned. Then how could I possibly own the company? Richard folded his hands over his cane. Because the investment wasn't made from your bank account. It came from a trust. A trust your father created. Nadia felt as though the ground beneath her had disappeared. My father. He died when I was 12. Richard nodded slowly. So everyone believed. The ballroom became silent once more. What do you mean? Richard looked into her eyes. Your father wasn't just an engineer. He was my closest friend, and the original co-founder of Whitmore Global Holdings. The guests gasped. Daniel lowered his head. He had hoped this truth would remain buried forever. Richard continued. When your parents died, your father left behind a protected family trust. It was designed to remain confidential until certain legal conditions were met. Nadia struggled to breathe. I don't understand. The trust could only be activated if you married, and only if you remained legally married. Jonathan opened another file. 3 years ago, Daniel Morgan approached Whitmore Global Holdings asking for emergency financing. He claimed he was building an innovative technology company. Richard nodded. I believed in the business, but I trusted your father's judgment even more. He always wanted his daughter to have a meaningful future. So instead of investing directly, I authorized the trust. Nadia stared at him in disbelief. So, the money, Richard finished her sentence, was invested in your name. Daniel looked as though he might collapse. One of the board members slowly stood. Are you telling us? Mrs. Morgan legally owns nearly half this company. Jonathan answered without hesitation. Yes. And according to corporate bylaws, he opened another document. Any attempt to transfer company assets without approval from the silent partner constitutes corporate fraud. The audience collectively inhaled. Jonathan looked directly at Daniel. Our investigation found evidence that over the last 18 months, millions of dollars were transferred into shell corporations, using forged authorization. Daniel shouted, I never forged anything. Jonathan remained calm. Then perhaps you can explain why these approvals contain your digital credentials, but were executed while you were in another country. Daniel had no answer. Sophia slowly removed her engagement ring. Tears filled her eyes. You used me. Daniel turned desperately toward her. Sophia, listen to me. No. She stepped away. You told me your divorce was finalized. You told me your company belonged to you. You told me we were building our future together. Her voice broke. Were any of those things true? Daniel couldn't answer. His silence was enough. Sophia placed the ring on a nearby table. I don't even know who you are. She walked away, fighting back tears. Her father quietly followed her. Richard watched everything unfold without celebration. Then he turned back to Nadia. "My dear, I know this has been overwhelming, but there is still one truth you deserve to hear." Nadia swallowed hard. "What truth?" Richard's expression grew serious. The fraud investigation didn't begin because of missing money. It began because someone inside Morgan Technologies was murdered. He stopped himself. The room froze. Richard corrected his words carefully. Because someone connected to the investigation died under highly suspicious circumstances. A stunned silence followed. Jonathan closed the file. "We believe that person was trying to expose the financial conspiracy before they passed away." He looked directly at Daniel. "And we now have reason to believe they left behind evidence." Daniel's eyes widened in panic, because he knew exactly who they were talking about, and he also knew, if that evidence was ever found, it would reveal a secret far more dangerous than his affair. The legacy they tried to bury. The ballroom remained frozen. No one spoke. The wedding had disappeared. Now it felt like a courtroom. Or perhaps, the final chapter of a story built on lies. Daniel stared at Richard Whitmore with fear in his eyes. Not because his affair had been exposed. Not because he had lost Sophia, but because he knew exactly what was coming next. Richard looked toward Jonathan Reed. "Bring it in." The ballroom doors opened once again. This time, 2 investigators entered, carrying several sealed evidence boxes. Behind them walked a woman in her early 50s with silver hair tied neatly behind her head. The moment Daniel saw her, he whispered, "No, she wasn't supposed to be here." Jonathan introduced her. "This is Margaret Ellis, former Chief Financial Officer of Morgan Technologies." Several executives gasped. Margaret had disappeared almost a year earlier. Daniel had claimed she retired due to health issues. That wasn't true. Margaret walked slowly toward the stage. "I didn't retire." She looked directly at Daniel. "I resigned because I refused to sign fraudulent financial reports." The room erupted in whispers. Jonathan opened the first evidence box. Inside were hard drives, folders, signed contracts, and financial records. "Before leaving the company," he explained, "Ms. Ellis copied every document she believed would one day expose the truth." Margaret nodded. "I knew no one would believe me without proof." She pulled out a small silver USB drive. "I kept this hidden for 11 months. Daniel clenched his fists. He recognized it instantly. He had searched for it everywhere. The ballroom projector switched on again. This time, security camera footage appeared. The date was 18 months earlier. The location, Morgan Technologies headquarters. Everyone watched as Daniel entered the executive finance office late at night. Minutes later, another man joined him. He was introduced on the screen as Victor Hale, Daniel's cousin and chief operations officer. The 2 men removed confidential files from the company vault. Then they signed a series of documents using forged digital approvals. Jonathan paused the video. These transactions transferred more than $420 million into a network of shell companies. The audience gasped. Victor, who had been sitting near the back of the ballroom, quietly stood up. Without saying a word, he headed toward the exit. One of the investigators stepped into his path. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. You're not leaving." Victor's face turned pale. Nadia watched everything unfold in silence. Only a few hours ago, she believed she had come to witness her husband's secret wedding. Now she was discovering that the man she loved had spent years building an empire on deception. Richard stepped closer to her. "I'm sorry." Nadia looked at him. "For what?" "For allowing this burden to fall on your shoulders." She shook her head. "No. The burden belongs to those who created it." Jonathan opened another folder. "There's still one question everyone is asking." He looked around the ballroom. "Why? Why would Daniel risk everything?" He pressed another button. A confidential email appeared on the screen. It had been sent 2 years earlier. From Daniel to Victor. "Once Nadia signs the remaining trust documents, the company will finally be ours. After that, we won't need her anymore." A wave of disbelief swept across the room. Nadia felt every word like a knife. Daniel had never married her for love. At least, not entirely. He had married the woman connected to a fortune he believed he could eventually control. Daniel finally shouted, "That's not the whole email." Jonathan calmly replied, "You're right. It isn't. He displayed the rest. The final line read, "Just make sure she never learns who she really is." The ballroom fell silent again. Nadia closed her eyes. For years she had blamed herself. She wondered if she hadn't been loving enough, supportive enough, patient enough. Now she understood. His distance, his lies, his secret wedding. None of it had started recently. It had started years ago. The marriage itself had become part of the plan. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Not for Daniel, but for the years she could never get back. Richard gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father often spoke about you." Nadia looked at him. He said one thing over and over. Richard smiled sadly. He said, "If my daughter ever faces darkness, she won't defeat it with anger. She'll defeat it with character." Nadia lowered her head. She wished her father were there. Just for 1 minute. To tell her everything would be all right. Jonathan continued, "There is one final document." He removed an old envelope, its edges faded with age. The letter was written by her father shortly before his death. Nadia's hands trembled. "My father wrote to me?" Richard nodded. "He asked me to protect it until the right moment." Jonathan carefully unfolded the letter. The ballroom became completely silent. He began reading. "My dearest Nadia, if you are hearing these words, it means life has taken a path I hoped you would never have to walk. Money can build companies, but it cannot build character. Power can attract people, but it cannot make them loyal. One day, someone may try to use your kindness as a weakness. If that day comes, don't fight to destroy them. Fight to protect the person you are. Because dignity is the one thing no one can steal unless you give it away. I have left you more than wealth. I have left you a choice. Choose integrity over revenge. Always. I will love you forever. Dad!" By the time Jonathan finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even several executives quietly wiped away tears. Nadia pressed the letter against her heart. For the first time in years, she felt as though her father had spoken directly to her. Richard looked toward the board of directors. "I believe it's time." The board members nodded, one by one, without hesitation. The chairman stood. "According to the company's bylaws, and based on the evidence presented today, we hereby suspend Daniel Morgan as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Another board member spoke. "All executive authority is revoked." A third added, "Pending the outcome of the fraud investigation." Daniel stood frozen. Everything he had spent years building was slipping away in a matter of minutes. Then the chairman turned toward Nadia. "Mrs. Morgan, as the company's largest individual shareholder, the board would like to ask whether you are willing to serve as interim chairwoman." The room turned toward her. Hundreds of eyes waited for her answer. Daniel looked up. For the first time that day, he wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking at the woman whose strength he had never understood. Nadia took a slow breath. She looked at the board, then at Richard, then at Daniel. Finally, she spoke. "I will accept." The room held its breath. "But not because I want power." She paused. "I accept because this company deserves honesty, and because every employee who worked hard deserves leaders they can trust." The ballroom erupted into applause. Not loud, not forced, respectful, genuine. Daniel lowered his head. He realized something in that moment. He hadn't lost because Nadia was richer or more powerful. He had lost because she had remained honorable while he had abandoned his own principles. But Daniel still carried one last secret, a secret no one in the ballroom had uncovered. And if it came to light, it could change Nadia's life forever. The choice that defined her future. The applause slowly faded. The ballroom, once decorated for a wedding, had become the place where years of deception finally came to an end. Daniel stood alone at the altar. The expensive tuxedo, the elegant decorations, the smiling photographs, all of it had become meaningless. Everything he had built on lies had collapsed in a single afternoon. Yet Richard Whitmore's expression remained serious. "There is one final matter," he said quietly. The room fell silent once more. Jonathan Reed stepped forward, carrying a small, sealed envelope. This envelope was recovered from Margaret Ellis's office after the investigation began. It was marked, "Open only if Nadia learns the truth." Jonathan handed it to Nadia. With trembling hands, she broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten note, only a few lines. She read it silently at first. Then Richard gently asked, Would you like me to read it? Nadia nodded. Richard unfolded the page. Dear Nadia, if this letter reaches you, it means Daniel has finally revealed the man he chose to become. There is something you deserve to know. 3 years ago, when Morgan Technologies was collapsing, Daniel came to me in tears. He told me he loved you and wanted to save the company you believed in. I agreed to release money from your father's trust because I believed I was helping both of you build a future together. But soon afterward, I discovered that Daniel had begun using company funds for secret accounts. I confronted him. He promised to change. Instead, he hid the truth. I spent the rest of my life collecting evidence because I knew one day you would need it. Never let someone else's dishonesty make you question your own kindness. Kindness is not weakness. It is courage. Margaret Ellis. The ballroom remained completely silent. Nadia folded the letter carefully. For the first time that day, she smiled. Not because she had won. Because she finally understood that none of this had been her fault. One of the investigators approached Jonathan. He whispered something into his ear. Jonathan nodded, then turned toward Daniel. Mr. Morgan, the Financial Crimes Unit has completed its preliminary review. Based on the available evidence, formal charges related to corporate fraud, forgery, and financial misconduct will now proceed through the legal system. The investigators stepped forward. Daniel closed his eyes. He did not resist. As they escorted him toward the ballroom doors, he stopped. He turned to face Nadia one last time. I know you probably hate me. Nadia looked at him calmly. I don't. Daniel looked surprised. I don't hate you, she continued. I simply don't recognize the man standing in front of me anymore. He lowered his head. I'm sorry. The words sounded sincere, but they arrived years too late. Outside, cameras flashed as news crews gathered. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Morgan, did you commit fraud? Is the wedding canceled? What happens to Morgan Technologies now? Daniel disappeared into the waiting vehicle without answering. For the first time in years, silence followed him instead of applause. Inside the ballroom, many guests quietly began to leave. Sophia approached Nadia. Her eyes were red from crying. I owe you an apology. Nadia shook her head gently. You don't. I truly didn't know. I believe you, Nadia replied. Sophia hesitated before asking, will you ever forgive him? Nadia looked toward the empty altar. Forgiveness doesn't always mean rebuilding a relationship. Sometimes it simply means refusing to let the pain control the rest of your life. Sophia nodded. Those words stayed with her long after she left the ballroom. 3 months later, Morgan Technologies looked very different. Under Nadia's leadership, every questionable contract was independently audited. Employees who had been afraid to speak finally felt heard. A confidential ethics office was established. Executive salaries were tied to transparency and long-term performance. The company's culture slowly changed. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. Investors who had once considered leaving began returning. The business recovered, not because of clever marketing, but because trust was rebuilt. Richard Whitmore often visited the headquarters, not as the man in charge, but as a mentor. One afternoon he smiled and said, Your father would be proud. Nadia smiled back. I hope so. 6 months later, Nadia stood in the same ballroom where Daniel's wedding had never happened. This time there were no flowers, no orchestra, no cameras, only employees. She announced the launch of the Morgan Foundation, a charitable initiative funded by a portion of the company's profits. Its mission was simple, to provide scholarships for students from families who had lost parents at a young age. As she finished her speech, she quietly looked upward. That one's for you, Dad. 1 year later, Nadia visited her parents' graves. She placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone. The wind moved gently through the trees. She took a deep breath. I finally understand what you meant. You weren't protecting money. You were protecting my future. Tears filled her eyes. But the greatest gift you left me wasn't the trust. It was the values that helped me survive. She smiled, and for the first time in many years, she felt completely free. Across town, Daniel had begun rebuilding his own life after facing the legal consequences of his actions. His reputation was gone. His fortune was gone. His influence was gone. The consequences of his financial misconduct followed him through the courts, and he accepted responsibility for the choices that had led him there. He would always carry the memory of the moment he looked into the front row and saw the woman he had underestimated. Not angry, not broken, simply unshakable. Years later, journalists often asked Nadia the same question. If you could go back to that wedding day, would you do anything differently? She always smiled before answering. No. Walking into that ballroom was the hardest decision of my life. But it was also the day I stopped living in someone else's lie. I didn't win because I exposed another person. I won because I refused to lose myself. Epilogue. Life has a quiet way of revealing the truth. Some people build success on deception, believing no one will ever notice. Others lose everything they thought they had, only to discover the strength they carried all along. Nadia never sought revenge. She sought the truth. And when the truth finally arrived, it didn't merely expose a dishonest man. It revealed an extraordinary woman. The guests who attended that wedding would remember many things. The interrupted ceremony, the billionaire's unexpected appearance, the hidden fortune, the corporate conspiracy. But above all, they would remember one unforgettable image. A woman sitting alone in the front row, calm and dignified, proving that the strongest response to betrayal is not anger, but integrity. The end.